Hi, how are you?
Really well. How are you?
I'm great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing this time with me.
So welcome. Such a privilege. Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. We'll do just a 5-minute kind of get to know each other, kind of run you through what this is all about. Sorry, I'm darting up. I've got two screens and I know that my camera's there. I'm looking at you there, but I'm...
No, it's just rearranging you so that I could do the same
thing. Awesome. So I'll just tell you a bit about myself. I like to connect people, and I've had good friends of mine. She has insomnia. Another friend of mine has insomnia, and she's commented on Facebook. And then my lawyer from a few years ago, she commented on it, and I just thought, like, I know so many people that have that help with these kinds of challenges in life. I need to start connecting more and more people because I already do it with anxiety, because I pass them on to Andrew Pierce, who I truly love. He's also with TCI. And I just thought that this was something that just keeps flashing up on Facebook. And I thought, I don't know the answer. A few years ago, we did lose a friend to overdose. He'd gone back to heroin because he was experiencing insomnia. And recently we lost our nephew to suicide. And it sort of just was a bit of a shock to the system, made me realize that, I just need to do a lot more. I need to be connecting a lot more people, because I do have that resource available. And that's where I found myself, just with that desire to connect people.
Cool. Yeah. So I had insomnia quite significantly, and have now reduced it down dramatically. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've worked with anyone around that, but it as I said on your post, it all stems back to the same kind of thing. It's just coming in what people are ready to hear and the message that matters most to them.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to track back. So it was always there.
Yeah.
I feel. It exacerbated my first year out of uni when I went into full-time work.
Mm-hmm.
And really struggled. And then I had 4 children under 6.
Yeah.
And 4 children under 6 and sleep deprivation is a fairly combination. Where are we at with swearing here?
No, please, by all means.
Yeah, so 4 children under 6 and insomnia is pretty hard work.
Yeah.
And for me, it was linked to depression. That comes from so many factors can contribute to that, but that was certainly one of the symptoms that I had that came through and shone through consistently, was the insomnia. Flip-sided with I don't know what you call it when you can't stay awake. So I would have 2 weeks of not being able to sleep and staring at the ceiling and going insane, and then I would have 2 weeks of not being able to stay awake and literally falling asleep, standing up doing the dishes, those kinds of things. So that was kind of my life. How old's the oldest now? 12. So 6 years ago, that's where I was. And then I started to turn it around. And the first thing that really made the biggest difference, because I was starting to think what I do now to manage it is a big stepping chunk, and there's been lots of steps along the journey. The first step was to lean into it and truly start to embrace it, which feels counterintuitive. But instead of laying in the bed at 3 a.m. wondering, would I get to go back to sleep? Would I get enough sleep? How am I going to get through tomorrow? Which was where I kind of started, was all of those questions were very well versed and I would generally answer, and they weren't pretty answers. So I started getting up. So at 3 a.m. I would get up and I would do what I needed to do for the house to be functional the following day. So that irrespective of what happened, I knew the dishes were done, and then I would do food prep. So I did a lot of slow cooking meals at that time. So I'd be able to put everything in the slow cooker and know that whether I got back to sleep or not, the kids and I were taken care of.
Okay. Awesome.
And interestingly, the more I did that, the more I kind of went, well, fine, okay, I'm going to be awake at 3 a.m. I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to utilize this time because my kids were all asleep at 3 a.m. The less I started waking up at 3 a.m.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. That's very interesting. Okay.
So leaning into it and embracing it felt like the first, like when I was trying to dissect, what did I do first? That's what I did first. And then it was no longer, so I no longer perceived it as a problem.
Yeah.
It was something that I had and it was there and I could rock out and do phenomenal things. I could work with my kids. I could do what I wanted, irrespective of it. And
Awesome.
it started to decrease. And then I was able to have a clear enough head because in that sleep deprived, counteracted with exhausted state, I couldn't access, like I had no brain function. The concept of doing any of the recommended actions was way too much.
Okay.
So the concept, since then, things that I have used are things like diet, exercise regimes. Some of these have worked, some of these haven't. So diet worked really well. Exercise regimes just pissed me off. And I know it's valuable for others. It just wasn't a match for me. Medication. What else have I done? Meditation, as well as so medication I found didn't work for me. Meditation I found really worked. But in that initial state, if someone had told me to meditate, and I'm sure there were people that were telling me to meditate, and I know that the diet book sat on my bookshelf for 3 years until I was in a position to be able to actually go down that pathway.
Yeah.
Because the overwhelm and the survival mode that I was in was too high. So the first thing I had to do was reclaim, okay, so this sucks. I can't solve it. How am I going to live with it? And when I did that, it started to decrease, which then gave me the brain function to actually get to the next step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you do need to embrace it, and that from that place you can actually do something about solving it, because I feel like it's more something that people are fighting against.
Yeah.
And that's what I've just experienced from all of the conversations that I've had about it. They're fighting it, just much like people fight addiction or fight depression or anxiety and all that other kind of stuff. Embracing it and then working with it. Because I do know what it's like to have small children and be sleep deprived. And good on you. And
sleep
to take
deprivation is a form of torture for a reason.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It is. What you had shared with us was that it was linked to your depression. And I was wondering if you would be so kind as to expand on that link and how that actually did impact upon the insomnia. How did it cause insomnia?
I don't know that I've thought about that before. So it's commonly, so one of the symptoms of depression is commonly insomnia, is within my awareness. It could just be my view of the world. I could be totally wrong. That was certainly my experience, though. And I think, so part of the reclaiming it was that I was then back in control, which as someone with depression, often that's something that's lacking and something that's missing is this sense of control. I'm not sure which came first. I'm not sure. So I was diagnosed with postnatal depression. I can track my insomnia back before that. I can also track my depression back before that. It just was never named or labelled prior to that. And so I have always just assumed that it was a symptom of depression. I don't think I ever dissected how they linked. Certainly the sleeping as well, like the oversleeping. Yeah. Is a common protective mechanism that people with depression utilize. So I can't face the world or go and hide in bed.
Yeah.
And that was certainly what I was doing. Like it's certainly where I came from. And I think potentially the insomnia was, so I was using sleep as a way to hide from the world and protect myself because of the depression and where I was at with my self-esteem, my self-worth. Self-love wasn't even a concept back then.
Yeah.
But my body couldn't sleep 23 hours a day every day for 4 weeks. So I'd get to the end of like the 2 weeks and my body would go, well, we've got to actually use the energy somewhere. Now you can just lay and stare at the ceiling for 2 weeks. And so that balance was, I was using sleep to hide, but my body could only absorb so much sleep potentially. I don't know. I'm totally like, I don't know what the connection really was. That's what I'm feeling at the moment as I kind of feel into it. And so, so the reaction was excess energy, which is one of the reasons that, and as I say, exercise therapy didn't work for me so well, but one of the reasons that exercise therapy is recommended so often is it uses that excess energy. And so if you've used up the excess energy, then the body is able to relax into sleep. As I said, I found it just pissed me off. And I know for some it is phenomenal, but for me, that wasn't my pathway. But that was part of what getting up in the middle of the night did. So I would get up and I would do the dishes or I would mop the floor, which utilized that excess energy. And I could then go back to bed and rest because my body wasn't over full of energy.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing on that. One of the questions that I keep getting asked is what happens when the meds don't work?
Yeah. So meds is a very broad term.
Yeah.
So for me, initially, as I say, like that, none of that was working. Nothing was working for me until I was willing to lean into it, until I was willing to learn to embrace it. So if the proposed solutions, and I know there's a heap out there for insomnia, if they're not working for you yet, it's possibly that you haven't leaned into it and embraced it. And until we learn to embrace ourselves and our, I don't want to use the word condition, but I can't think of a better one. But until we learn to embrace what we're going through, we're going to keep getting that same lesson.
Yeah.
And so, so for me, it felt like nothing worked. I was on antidepressants. I tried, like there's a whole range of insomnia specific medications, like how to sleep, sleeping tablets. So sleeping tablets have the opposite effect on me. They hyperactive me, trying to find the right language. So Phenergan is commonly used to put people to sleep. I become hyperactive. So all of the medications kind of had that impact on me. And Phenergan I haven't tested, but some of the other sleep medications I have tested since I've kind of been along this journey, because there are still times where this flares up for me, and they all now work the way they're prescribed to work rather than the opposite of it. So, and what's shifted for me is the distinction of embracing it. And then for me, diet was a really big factor. So it's really funny, like we're having this conversation, the last 2 nights I've woken up at 3 a.m. and it's like, I've resolved this. And now I'm going to go and talk to people about how I'd resolved this. But the things I can use now work much more effectively because it's so rare. So I think often our bodies can become attuned to or unsensitive to various whatever it is, various chemical substances, whether it's food, whether it's medications, whether it's whatever it is. When my body is cared for and respected, so for me that involves eating a specific diet, not taking medication all the time. So I rarely take medication, and I rarely so other chemicals, so things like alcohol, caffeine, there's a third one in my brain 2 seconds ago that I've lost. Things like that I really consume. And so my body is feeling clean, which means that if I need to embrace utilising something additional, my body responds to it really well.
Okay.
That answer the question?
Yeah, that does. In terms of diet, yeah, it really does. I can see how a cleaner body helps you to actually make use of the drugs then.
Yeah.
I would love to spend, the rest of our time more delving a bit more into how to embrace it, because the standard methods of dealing with it is go to the doctor, get pills. I know that there's a lot of sleep hygiene around it, like don't use your phone, the blue light filter, no TV before bed, no caffeine, fixing all that kind of stuff. But only from my experience with TCI and how they approach things like depression and anxiety and insomnia and all the other ranges of what they class as safe problems. This is very new to some people, and if the first step is to embrace it, even to myself, I wouldn't know where to start if I was fighting insomnia a challenge. Could you share with us?
So I think the first thing I had to do was change the response to my core question.
Mm-hmm.
So I was asking myself, how can I live like this? And the answer was often, I can't. And it's miserable and nobody else has to. Why should I have to?
Mm-hmm.
And I trust that people are kind of resonating with those kinds of answers. And then something shifted and I started to ask, how can I live like this? And I started to actually answer with, all right, so I know that I can't sleep at 3 a.m. and I'm going to need to have a nap at like 3 p.m. when I need to deal with kids. What do I need to make sure I take care of in my awake moments? What I really had to let go of was conforming to societal norms of when people sleep.
Okay.
So society tells us that we should go to bed at 10 p.m., get up at 7 p.m., and life should be happy and it should work really well, which is great if it's working for you. But if you're going to bed at 8 p.m. and waking up at 3 p.m. and you then need to go back to bed at like 6 a.m. and sleep until 8 a.m., how the hell do you balance that? And so I started to reschedule my day to fit my fairly screwed up sleep patterns and my fairly inconsistent sleep patterns. So I knew that for my kids and myself, the two top priorities were clean dishes and some kind of food.
Yeah, standard.
How do that's the level of survival that I was at. If the kids had been fed from clean dishes, that was a good day.
Yes.
And not always like they were always fed, but whether the dishes were clean or not was another matter. Like
I'm not here to judge.
Yeah, no, I know. But I want people to know, like, that's the level that I came from.
Yeah.
Do I have food for my kids beyond the muesli bar from the packet? And I'm not judging people doing that. I still do that some days. Do I have food for my kids and do I have clean dishes to serve it? Yeah. So at 3 a.m., the question, instead of how am I going to survive my day, the question became, how am I going to survive my day? What needs to happen now so I can survive my day?
Yeah.
So I would get up and I would do slow cooperation. So like the number of times that I cut carrots, potatoes and stuff at 3 a.m. and put them in the slow cooker so that at 5 p.m., so I'd have to get back up at 8 a.m. and I'd have to do that anyway, but I could just turn the slow cooker on. Instead of getting to 4 or 5 p.m. and going, I don't know what I'm going to cook for dinner. I don't know how I'm going to face this. And the kids are screaming and I just want to go back to bed and hide because I've had no sleep. And doing the dishes. So our dishwasher, I'm sure our dishwasher ran more when this was at my peak. And I wasn't setting out to embrace it at that point. I was setting out to survive. and setting out to just step my level of survival up one tiny notch. And finding, so for me, the priority was dishes and food.
Yeah.
And then once I started to conquer dishes and food, it became washing. So clean clothes. So now they can have clean dishes, they can have clean clothes, and they can have something to eat. And that was it. It wasn't about embracing insomnia. I think it's such a great question and great for me to go back and reflect. It wasn't about embracing it. It was about, well, how do I start to step up one notch? What's one tiny thing that I can do that would, and it wasn't about me. It was about my kids. It benefited me, but it wasn't about me. It was about my kids. How can I make my kids' lives one step better?
Yeah.
So instead of screaming while I'm trying to cook dinner, if dinner is organized, if instead of like half rinsing plates and being fearful that I'm going to give them food poisoning, do the dishes.
Yeah.
And then what happened was I actually really started to enjoy that. So one of the things, as I'm sure you can imagine, with 4 kids under 6, time to myself was like, it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
There was no opportunity, like 4 kids under 6 and a shift working husband. Like the highlight of my week was the day that he was home and I could go and do the food shopping on my own. Like that was the... And so 3 a.m. started to become my look after me time. So I started with, let's do the dishes, let's make sure the food prep's done. And now I'm still sitting here staring at the ceiling. Maybe I could have a cup of tea. Maybe I could read a book and do something for myself. And the more I lent into that, the more I started to embrace this concept of, well, being awake at 3 a.m. is kind of cool. Being awake at 3 a.m. means I get to like not have a child hanging off my legs. And I think the moment I remember going, I'm really enjoying this. Like I've got this down pat. The kid, like the morning routine's going really well. The kids, I had one child at school. The bus routine was going really well. And then I slept through the night and it's like, well, I don't want to sleep through the night. And so I started kind of pushing against that. And like anything, the more we kind of focus on pushing away from something, the more it comes into our life. So I started sleeping through the night 2 or 3 nights. So I started sleeping through the night. It's like, oh, this is weird. But it came from like, well, I'm actually really enjoying this time at 3 a.m. And so in the years since then, I found how to do that. My kids have got a little bit older and I found how to do that more consistently. But at the time it was, I'm actually really enjoying this. And so it kind of disappeared. And it's this weird kind of contrasting thing. Yeah, I didn't say to myself, and I think it's such a valid point to ask the question. I didn't say to myself, I'm going to embrace this. I said to myself, how do I start to function with this? Yeah. And as I started to function with it, I kind of went, oh, this is kind of cool. I get to like do the dishes without having to pull the child out of the dishwasher as I'm doing it, and stop the toddler from suffocating the baby at the same time, and like the complexities of having that many small children. And so I started to really enjoy it. And then I started to sleep through the night. And it just seemed to happen that way. As I kind of overcame the challenge, it disappeared. And I think so often we focus so much on the challenges that they keep reappearing when we step away from it. So I really stepped away from it. Like I really started to get to a point, not initially, like initially it was how do I survive my day? And then I got to, I'm really loving this. I get to have time for myself. And then I started sleeping through the night. And so then my question became, well, how do I get time to myself with the children home? And in terms of insomnia, it was, how do I use this to my best advantage? Yeah. How do I make the most of this and get the results that I want? And then the flip of it was the weeks where I was sleeping so often. And in those weeks, I had to do the same thing. And it was what really matters most. How do I make sure that everything is done that matters? And I had to really hone in on my priorities. Food. And then I like grew and progressed. because I just couldn't stay awake. I just couldn't function at all those 2 weeks. And so there was this balancing act of, I'm going to utilize the insomnia weeks and I'm going to get as much done. So most of my cleaning, like my household cleaning, so cleaning the bathroom, mopping the kitchen floor, all of that happened in those weeks where I was awake. And then in the times where I was dead on my feet, I didn't have as much to do. So I really lent into working with that cycle.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. The concept of leaning into it, embracing it, doing. For me, I understand that you got to make the most of the situation that you're in. Fighting against it is just going to create more of that problem.
Yeah.
So your situation was unique, where you wake up at 3 a.m. and can't get back to sleep. For those that are, they go to bed at night and they're there at 5 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m. in the morning still awake, how do you suggest they begin embracing that?
So possibly not the expert for that.
Yeah.
Just kind of thinking through potentials, but don't proclaim to know that, like, I know how I overcame my own experience. They're going to bed when tired. So I used to, one of the things that used to happen is if I didn't go to bed when I was tired, I would then kick into like a second wind and I would then be up until quite late. So acknowledging when you get tired. And again, there's this societal expectation that we go to bed at whatever time it is. So the number that keeps coming up in my mind is 10 p.m. I'm in bed at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. So when my kids were smaller, and I actually was thinking about it last night, like at 7 p.m. I was ready for bed and my kids aren't ready for bed yet. It's like, this is when I want to go to bed. So when I get tired, I will go to bed, whether that's 7 p.m. or whatever it is. Because if I missed that window, I was stuffed. So tapping in and actually paying attention to what those natural windows are is really valuable. So I know for me, if I'm up after 9 p.m, I then even now still start to kick into that. I'm now awake until 3 a.m, 4 a.m, 5 a.m, and sleep while the kids are at school. And I have the absolute luxury of doing that. I acknowledge it's not a luxury everybody has. But knowing that I need to be in bed at, so for me now it's about 8:30, but back then it was like 7 p.m, which worked really well because it's when my kids needed to go to bed. So I used to go to bed at the same time my kids did. Yeah. And people around me didn't understand that and didn't, like, I live with a night owl. The ideal day starts at midday and then he works all night until 4 a.m. and then comes home and goes to bed. That's his ideal. And the people around me are all night owls. And so none of them understood this concept of don't ring me after 7 p.m. I won't answer the phone. So to really start to claim that boundary for myself. And this is how I operate. This is how my body works. And I'm going to follow that, which is a big ask for a lot of people. And I totally acknowledge it's a big ask. But by doing that, it meant that I didn't get that overtired into the night. And I've just got a really good insight from kind of mapping that out. So my 11-year-old at the moment is really suffering with falling asleep. And I suspect we're missing that window for him. So he's staying awake too late, then he's gone into second wind and he can't go to sleep. So what I'll be trialing with him is an earlier bedtime. Which I'm pretty sure he's going to rebel again. But tapping into, so for me it was tapping into, I'm in bed at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. As soon as my kids were in bed, I would go to bed. And part of the reason I was able to do that was that I knew I would get my me time somewhere. So I think as mothers, often we get the kids into bed, and certainly the stories I've heard back from other mothers, we get the kids into bed and it's the only chance they get to have their me time. And so they embrace that as their me time, and then they've gone past their going to sleep window and they go into staying awake all night.
Yeah.
So if we know that we can get that me time somewhere else, then we can go, okay, kids are in bed, I'm going to go to bed, I'm tired. Does that answer?
It does.
I'd have to actually have someone go away and apply it to see if it works, because it's, as I say, it's not necessarily where I came from.
No, that was very interesting. Because it is true that we do get windows of time where we're really tired. And if we don't take advantage of that, we do kick our second wind. And especially at night with our cortisol releasing, and then you've got none left in the morning. And that's something that I will definitely be explaining more in another video. So that was really interesting, just to actually embrace it. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a mother that has to go to bed with their children, which, I do these days. I'm at 7 p.m. I go to bed now. Or if you're working for yourself or you don't have kids, that it is an important point that you do need to embrace those moments where you actually are tired and set those boundaries up. And that I know that is hard, setting up boundaries, but it is respect for your own body. And if you're experiencing something, it needs to be done.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. And it's not an easy way to step forward to set those boundaries and to hold those boundaries and to have others understand it. Like, as I say, my husband's totally a night owl. He could never understand why that was my sleep cycle. And I had to lean in and respect myself enough to abide by that, or it was just going to continue. And where I was, and I think particularly in the coaching world, we're quite familiar with, if the pain is enough, we'll do whatever it takes. So if the pain of the insomnia is enough, people will lean into setting those boundaries because they have to.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, awesome. So we've got a few minutes left. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us on the topic of insomnia and how to solve it or how to manage it?
So once you've got to that point of embracing it, experiment. There's no right answer. There's so many things out there that we can try, so many things out there that we can explore. Trust that they know their body. Like, trust that if you are experiencing insomnia, you know your body and you know what you need, and follow that instinct and experiment until you find the thing you need. So for me, the diet, the fail-safe diet is the diet that I do, but there are a number of other diets. Experiment, see what works. Fully commit to a minimum time period that you're going to do it all in, and then make an evaluation at the end of that. The other thing, and just trial several things. So don't get disheartened if something doesn't work. I tried medication, it didn't work. I tried exercise, it didn't work. They may work for others, but I fully committed and I embraced it for, so exercise was a full 6 weeks. Medication was 3 or 4 weeks or something, until I got, it should have worked in that time frame. So know the time frames. Fail-safe diet, I committed 3 months to. It made a difference within 2 weeks, which was awesome. Orgasm therapy, I don't know if there's actually someone out there marketing that, but that certainly worked, and it worked fairly effectively and fairly quickly. What else do I do? Oh, meditation. So my meditation app that I use is called Yoga Nidra. It's a free app on iPhone. Again, commit to it, do it consistently. So for me, it probably took me 5 weeks to actually get to a point where I could embrace that fully and it made a difference. And then it got to the point so that then I was so anchored to it putting me to sleep that I could then just turn, just the sound, the beginning sound of it was enough that I'd go to sleep in the middle of the night. But it was through consistent application So yeah, be willing to, and I know that anybody who's experiencing insomnia and is in the pain of the influence of that, they will be willing to just commit to one thing at a time and test one thing at a time. Otherwise you don't know what worked and what didn't, would be the greatest sort of stepping stone forward, I think.
All right. Thank you so much, Amy. I really, really appreciate your time today. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this with as many people as possible. And I know that you are a coach yourself and that you do help people move from safe problems to risky problems, and that you have a process for that. If anyone is interested in getting in touch with you just to pick your mind on the topic or anything else, how would they do so?
Yeah, so through my Facebook page is probably the easiest way. If wherever you post this video, you share the link of that, that would be really cool.
Yep.
I think my ID on Facebook is agrantham81. I'm just looking because I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, so facebook.com/agrantham81. Grantham spelt Grant Ham, GRANTHAM. Grant Ham. So Grant Ham 81 Facebook. That was so badly communicated. I trust that the message got through. So yeah, feel free to send me a message. Let me know in the message that you've watched this video and you're looking to explore. I'd love to connect and help out.
I'm looking forward to it. Okay, thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate your time today. Anything you need, just let me know, okay? All right. And so I guess
Thank you. It's been fun.